I'm tired already. I'm going to walk around. One of my mentors, my main mentor, always said, when we work with trauma, you need to be nimble. Do you know the word in English, nimble? How do you say nimble in Italian?
Nimble?
Creative, responsive, not rigid, limber.
Limbo is a space in between.
But nimble means reactive, nimble. I don't even know the word in Spanish. Flexible. That you can't just expect to know what to do and have everyone follow it. You have to react to the situation, just as our dear Marco Longo is not here with us on our panel. So our group shifted and we have a loss already. Right? I mean,
Yes.
I was so moved by everyone's presentation yesterday and today's plenary that I'm not showing any PowerPoint, and I'm just going to talk from the heart and really share my thinking and experience with working with trauma, which I do all the time around the world and in New York. And I intentionally chose not to show any pictures of trauma because it affects our limbic systems. And who needs to see events that we know about? It's hurtful to recreate the visuals of those experiences. Trauma disrupts attachment to people. And I'm going to talk a little bit about just the impact of trauma on people. And I always say that there's no such thing as a trauma. A trauma is an event that happens within the context of a culture. So if an earthquake happens in one country and an earthquake happens in another, it's not the same event. I mean, the natural event is the same, but how it's experienced and metabolized is very different. And there are certain pulls when we, as helpers, work with people who've been traumatized. We call them countertransferences, if you think this way, because I guess you can tell I'm not a psychodramatist, right? Maybe. I'll give you an example. Even with our panel, as I listened to everyone, I was so moved, and I was relating to what everyone did, and it's such a privilege to be with everyone on this group. But when we work, we would never sit. Imagine if we had a group of people who have been traumatized. You sit down and we'll stand up because we're the experts. That's bullshit. We're human beings and we want to connect with people, because I think the key in working with trauma is the human connection. Because when someone has a traumatic experience, they lose attachments. Like we lost Marco Longo. We lost part of our panel. Not terribly traumatic, but it's a loss. And I was curious because he's so good to hear what he would have shared with us. And it's a loss for all of us, not just for us on the panel. So if we can just be with someone, it doesn't matter the modality. If we're using psychodrama, I mean, I'm analytically group trained, but I'm not a group analyst. Does it really matter? People just want to know, can you help us? Can you hear me? Can you understand me? Do you have a sense? Don't assume you know what I'm feeling. That's a mistake. But just to be able to be with someone who has had such an overwhelming experience. The psychiatrist Judith Herman talks about bearing witness. How do you say that in Italian? Bearing witness? To really listen to someone. And without judgment, without anything. But just to allow them to share their experience. Ascoltare. My Italian is terrible, even though my girlfriend is Italian. What? They're getting the translation, even better. But there are certain pulls, there are certain reactions to happen to us after an event. Especially one of the pulls for the leader is to want to help and to want to rescue. And sometimes the hardest thing is to do less. To do less. I'll give you a perfect example. I was working with a company that lost about 300 people in the terror attack on 9/11. Now, my mother used to work on the 99th floor of a different building, but she died a few years before then. So I had an emotional connection to the event itself. And I'll share more about that in terms of bearing witness. So we're at this company. I'm working with some very senior people. And nobody came to the groups. You know, nobody wanted to talk about it because they were still in the middle of it. And we were at their workplace. Now, a trauma group is different than a regular group. I don't know where everybody here works in terms of groups, but in a trauma group, after an event, they don't come to our office. We go to them, usually, wherever the event was. So it's a different skill, and the boundaries are different, because we really want to be aware of boundaries. When a traumatic event happens, boundaries have been changed, not for the better. So part of our work is to help reestablish healthy boundaries. So we're at this company, and I'm with esteemed colleagues. We're waiting, we're having coffee, we're talking. And finally, a security guard comes in and he says, "Can I talk to someone?" And my friends were like vultures preying on the dead. I mean, he wasn't dead. But all of a sudden, because they've been so waiting to help, we are here to help. And 6 of them just smothered this man. And I looked at it, and these are skilled people. Psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers with lots of experience. So this man comes, and they swarm on him. And I'm watching this, and I say, "Goodbye." And I walk away, because he didn't need me. He didn't need all of them. He needed to be listened to. And they're, boom, tell us what happened. Tell us what happened. We don't want to tell. We don't want to ask what happened. We want to let it to unfold. That's the timing. That's the pacing of allowing the processing to experience, and not to rush. It's not about being smart. It's not about being right. It's about being right with someone. It's the human connection which has been disrupted, and the ability just to sit and to listen and to connect with someone. How do you teach that? How do you teach someone to listen? It's the hardest part, because when I teach, let's say in a university, the students tell me what they think they need to know, and I certainly disagree with that. But I listen, and then I share, "What do you think about this?" And I teach more by asking questions than by telling them what's right, especially when it comes to trauma. So the one example of the man who came for help and all my colleagues, well, that's a countertransferential pull, and there are many. When I teach people, when I talk to my colleagues at Columbia, "What do you teach?" And I talk about, I teach treatment of childhood sexual abuse, they walk away from me. They don't want to hear it, even though it's such an important topic, because it's too painful. Firemen, I don't know how to say it, and it's being translated into Italian, I forget. But somebody who fights fires. When a fire happens, people naturally run away, and firemen are trained to go too. And emotionally, as trauma therapists, that's what we do. But we don't run, because I remember treating a fireman in my private practice, and he died maybe 4 months ago. He was a good guy. And he described how, as a fireman, he knew exactly what he had to do, but he said when the truck is going to the fire, they kind of just go, not very slowly, but thoughtfully. And when the truck stops, they get out, and the firemen who are too anxious and run to the fire, those are the ones who die, because they get killed with the smoke, they get burnt, because their judgment is off, because they want to help too much. So the skilled firemen, they take their time. They know what they're doing. They're looking to see if they see any smoke. They're feeling the wind. They're getting a sense of what is it that they're going to? Where is the water? And it's the same thing with us emotionally when we get called in to ask to help someone. If they come to our office, if we go to an event, it's the idea of knowing, but just taking our time and connecting. There's nothing more important than the connection of the human connection. And some research shows that I think 70% of the healing, regardless of the modality, is the therapeutic relationship that we have with the person who's been traumatized. It doesn't matter if we're using group analysis or psychodrama. My students use dialectical behavioral therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy. It's the relationship. If they don't connect with us and us with them, it's plastic. It's flat. So, bearing witness. Both of my parents were Holocaust survivors. And every Friday night when I was a little boy, I used to watch my mother light the candles because her sister was gassed in a camp. And many, many more were killed. And I didn't know. She never talked about it. None of my parents talked about their experiences. It was the trauma was communicated non-verbally. So every Friday night, for years, I would watch my mother light the candles and cry. And this was my training, much more so than any graduate school, postgraduate, it doesn't matter. It's the capacity to sit and be with someone through their pain and just be with them. Does that make sense? It's so easy to say. What's that? To contain. And from then, whatever is shared with us, then our theory can inform what our interventions are. And I've taught intervention strategy. Doesn't matter. But it's the relationship. What do I want to talk about? Oh, loneliness and isolation. And thank you. I forgot, that was my main topic, was loneliness, isolation, and I use humor, but never at the expense of the human being. I happen to have a sense of humor, and it's gotten me through very difficult times in my life. And I try to share that with people. Not the difficult times, but the capacity to laugh with another human being. So when I was doing the work in Sarajevo, the very first time, I was very nervous. So I asked my colleagues, what should I talk about? And there was a woman, a psychologist in the Ukraine, whom I did Skype meetings with once a week to help hold her during the issues in the Ukraine. And she said to me, when it comes to disasters and traumas, there's hurt, there's sadness, there's anger, but the predominant feeling is loneliness. Loneliness. And everywhere I go and I listen to people, they say, it's the loneliness. And it's the loneliness between people, and it's also the loneliness within ourselves. It's the intrapsychic loneliness and the interpersonal loneliness, which happens after an event. And shame. People are ashamed that they've lived and survived an event, or they're ashamed to hear the event that they couldn't help someone. I'm going to talk a little bit about suicide now, because people need to talk about it so people don't kill themselves. And every anniversary of September 11th, I lead a group in New York, which is different than the group I've led with so many other organizations and people. And last year, I was at this event, and I'm at a table, and I don't know anybody. And when you're leading a trauma group, unlike a group, and maybe if you're in private practice where you have some control over who joins the group, when you're leading a trauma group, you have no control over the selection of people who are in your group. It's random. It seems random. But you don't select the people, you don't screen them. You come to the group and you work with them. So I'm running this group, maybe 8 people in it, and there are 4 from a different country, a husband and wife, and a mother and a daughter. You can't make this stuff up, right? So it's a husband and wife, and a mother and a daughter. I'll come into the audience, because this is the audience I want to talk to. And the mother and daughter, I would usually be sitting in the very back row smoking cigarettes when I was studying. And so it's the mother and daughter and husband and wife. What do they do for a living? They're all policemen. They're police officers. They're all police officers. And why did they come? Because they're Canadian. The police officers were committing suicide. And it's never talked about. Hi, Nesset. And it's the connection. They needed help. And it's shame. First of all, police officers don't talk about feelings. You know, we're cops. We're tough. We have to enforce the law. Husband and wife, mother and daughter. And they're all officers. And they came for help because there's tremendous shame. Can you imagine talking about suicide within the police department? They have codes. There's a brotherhood of silence also. You don't talk about these things. And in trauma groups, you want to create, as Maurizio was saying, and all of us I think were saying, a safe space between each other and within oneself to be able to talk about things. Suicide happens. It's one of the third leading causes of death in the United States of teenagers, is suicide. That's what research has shown. Suicide. I don't know if I ever told the story here about the bee sting. You can't make these stories up if you listen to people. So a colleague of mine he was one of my group mates, and he was one of my professors. And when his son was, I think his son was maybe 8 years old, they have a house in the country, and the son was stung by a bee. Do you know what a bee? So stung, let's say, here on the forearm. I don't know if it was the right or the left. He was stung maybe at 10 in the morning. 2 in the afternoon, the little boy goes to his father, "Daddy, Daddy, I was stung by a bee." And he shows them where the sting was. The stinger was in the arm, forearm. So my friend's a good father, takes out the stinger, cleans it up, puts on a bandage, talks to his son, gives him a hug, gives him a kiss. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You said you were stung at 10 in the morning. Why are you telling me now? So the son says to him, "But Daddy, sometimes you have to be in a safe place to talk about scary things." Right? Wait, what? The son knows. Children know. If we listen to them, they know. In talking about listening, our groups are our best supervisors. Do you know what I mean? If we listen to our groups, they'll tell us where to go. They'll even show us how to help them if we listen to the group members. If we don't have a set agenda in our minds. That's what I mean by nimble, and not being preset in terms of about what our thinking is, in terms of how best to help. Haven't made any interpretations, just being with people, connecting with human beings, and listening and letting them tell us the best way to help them. To help reduce their isolation and sense of loneliness. How's my time? A couple of minutes? I'm in no rush. I could talk about this all day, if you'd like to listen. And I write about this. I lost my train of thought. Listening? No. Cohesion, composition, isolation. Oh, no one should heal from trauma alone. That's a quote from my colleague, Suzanne Phillips. If you have a chance to read her work, she's really good. And no one should do the trauma work alone. Now, a lot of the groups I led by myself, in some way co-led with colleagues. But I always had, I ran, for 3 years, I ran 3 trauma groups every Tuesday, in addition to teaching, in addition to running a full-time practice. And I think I was president of the Eastern Group Psychotherapy Society at the time. You can't do this alone. Just like they say, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to raise a therapist. And we need the support. I had a colleague who was in a different state, whom I would talk to once a week, just to share the experiences that I had in the groups that I led. Some things were so terrible that I heard, I didn't even want to share with her, because I didn't want to traumatize my friend, who was my consultant, because it was just so awful what I was listening to. And eventually I gave a talk at a university, and I shared the 10 things that I would never tell her during the time we were working together, and they were just horrible. And that's what we listen to. We need people to share. We as the group leader working with trauma need to be understood and held also by colleagues and people we trust. What are we saying? No, she said nothing. What? About, we need to share. Just like at the end of our presentation yesterday, we all got together, we talked, we gave a hug. We needed to, for ourselves, we're a group, as we presented. We don't have to agree with each other, but we can listen to each other, we can respect each other, and we can work together. One of the things about containing is the ability to contain experiences we might agree with or disagree with, but be able to respect and listen to differences. I think that's essential and part of our humanity. Right? To be able to contain the differences and hold them without reacting. So thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And you pointed out the importance of not to be alone, the isolation. And I remember when we were in Ukraine, and they offer us a room of hotel. Judith and Nessa suggested we can have an apartment together and cook together and share, because it was very painful. And also among us, we have psychosomatic disease during at the end of the workshop. No, yes, and one idea for the future, here there are many members of our task force for peace building. With Esther Stone, we had the idea to have a Zoom meeting with IAGP trauma and disaster expert. If you can, with us, help in the future, maybe next year, to have a Zoom meeting about to learn more about their experience, how not to re-traumatize the victims, can be good for our task force.